So now we'll see data types. What are data types in Python? So first let me explain what data type means. पहले ये जानने की कोशिश करते हैं कि data type क्या होता है. So when we speak or when we write, we call out certain, for example, things. For example, अगर हम लिखते हैं तो हम कभी numbers लिखते हैं. So sometimes we write numbers. Okay. कभी कभी हम क्या लिखते हैं? We write alphabets. So कभी मैं ऐसे लिखूँगा 10. Sometimes I'll write line. Things like that. Sometimes I'll write 10.44. So these things are different. So to a human it's also different, to a computer it's also different, because computer has to understand what sort of things are there, because these real numbers are differently dealt by computer, and this floating point number is differently dealt in computers. Okay, so for example, how if you see a video file has that format dot, for example, mp4. If you see an image file dot jpeg. What are these significant? So for example, when softwares have to read, there is a header in each of the file. अब कंप्यूटर को कैसे पता है कि ये जो बाइनरी मेरे पास पड़ा है ये वीडियो ही है? So there is this format or extensions or some these extensions basically are headers for softwares. They have to read the header first. अच्छा ये वीडियो वाली फाइल है तो इसको वीडियो प्लेयर से चलाना है. So I understand my point. So computer have to understand what sort of file it is. अगर उसके पास कोई image है तो image viewer have to be triggered वो image दिखाने के लिए. So it has a header in the file. So every file is basically a binary. तो मैंने बोला हर एक फाइल ones and zeros में है. तो for computer everything is equal. तो इसको कैसे पता है कि ये image है, this thing is a video, this thing is an audio. Basically there is some headers attached to it. तो ये header को read करके वो पता करता है कि कौन सा सॉफ्टवेयर ट्रिगर करना है इस फाइल को चलाने के लिए. You might have seen if you sometimes have misclicked on an image and you open, for example, a video in image viewer or something. It is not playing. It shows some gibberish like 100 and there are some symbols like that. Okay, so you actually just clicked the wrong software for that. So how computer identifies this? So there are these headers attached. Similar happens with the data. Data can be numbers, alphabet, strings can be there, floating points can be there, and it depends on how much memory location will be allocated. Okay, so if we have this 10 number, it's an integer data type, so we have to call it as an integer. Then line, it is a string type data type. So computer will interpret it differently, because the operations that are possible on integers are not possible on strings. हम लोग दो integers को multiply कर सकते हैं, for example 10 into 4, but you cannot multiply a line with a king. Okay, that's why we have different data types in computers. So ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि we should have a similar data type, कि इतना tension क्यों होना, but for a data type we have different operations as well. So in here, the first line that you will see is Python is a dynamically typed language. So if somebody comes from a background of C, C++, they might have seen when they define something, they write integer, for example, number 1. And then they'll have, this int says the computer that this number is an integer. This is actually, these languages are called statically typed languages. Statically typed language. So in that, upfront you have to mention what is the data type. Okay, but Python was made in such a way that they use it dynamically typed, so that you don't have to mention the type of the variable. From the data itself, it will know the type of the variable. Okay, so it's a dynamically typed language. I also told you statically typed, like C, C++, Java, all these languages are statically typed language. You have to mention what is the variable that you are using. If you have to use a string, you have to write string like this in Java, or in, for example, in C++, you have to write for example, character array of 10 characters. This is also some sort of string. So here in C, C++, Java, you have to mention the type of the data upfront before using that variable. But Python is a dynamically typed language. That means that at the runtime, I don't want to go into what runtime means. So there is a compile time, there is a runtime thing. I don't want to delve into the details, because I told that comes under this compiler subject. Runtime, basically there is a binding happening and we don't want to delve into the details. So at that time, it processes what is the type of this variable. If you say x is equal 10, it will say this x is of type integer that we saw previously. If x is equal to string hello, then it will say x is of type string. And you don't have to say explicitly string, then name the variable, then give it, as is done by the C, C++, Java. This is dynamically typed language. So if you now see these data types, there are a lot of data types available in Python. I'll just share the screen and I'll show you how many data types are there. So there is numeric. In numeric, for example, in 1, 2, 3, there are integers, there are floats, and there are complex numbers. Okay. Then there are dictionaries. Then there are boolean. There is a set. There are sequence set like strings, list. I have just pasted this, like giving credit to those geeks for geeks. They have made a good table of these. So we'll see each of these things. Each of the what numeric is, what is there, what is an integer, complex number में क्या होता है, float में कैसे कैसे चीजें होती हैं. We'll see all of these things. Okay. So going to the first thing is numeric type. Numeric type में हमारे पास क्या क्या है? The first thing is integer type. Integer क्या होता है? Which is integral values like 2, 4, -4, 8. It won't have the point in it. So it won't have 2.1. It won't have things like that. So this is called floating point basically. If you have an integral value, these are integers. So when you assign a is equal to 2, this is of type integer. So floating type means that there is a point. This is called floating point because this point can be everywhere. So you can write 22.83. So this is a floating point. So it is an the data type, floating data type. So we use real numbers like for example, if you have to mention 1 by 3, 1 by 3 is equal to 0.33 something. So this is actually a floating point number. So then in the mathematics, as I said, the inventor of this Python was mathematician. So it also supports complex numbers. In your +1 or maybe in your class 10th or so, you might have read about complex numbers because these complex numbers are used in quantum computation. They are used in really good calculations. So that's why it also supports complex numbers. Complex numbers, as you see, that they have a real part and an imaginary part. And an imaginary part. So this is real part, this is imaginary part. So this also supports these complex numbers. Just going into the code back and I'll show you, I'll just run these things. So here age is an integer, price is an float, and this imaginary number is of type complex. And you can even print the type. So you can just write print and then type. Type is actually a function which tells the type, and I want to see what is the type of imaginary number. So imaginary number is type, it will show me. It's of class complex. Okay. So within the numeric type we have 3 types. The first type is integers, which stores integral values like 1, 2, 5, -5, 2, 3, 6 and something like that. Then we have floating point numbers. Floating point numbers, in those floating point numbers we have numbers like 19.99, 18.63, like basically the numbers which have point in it. Even if you write 30.0, 30.0 is also a floating point number. If I write 30.0, it now becomes a floating point number. Initially it was an integer without this 0. If I write 0.0, then it becomes a floating point number. Then imaginary number, as I said, like it has a real part and a complex part as well. So this is an imaginary number. Then the second thing that we have is text type. Okay, text type of data. For example, if you see, we have strings. So you can say name Alice, or for example name, let me speak a random name, let's say Zubair. Okay, so Zubair name here is a string. Okay, a string is enclosed usually in the double quotes. Sometimes you can also use single quotes. You can write the string in the single quotes as well. So I have an example of strings over here. You can just see, for example, name, it's Alice, and message is, for example, hello world. Here we have used double quotes, and here we have used single quotes. So you can print these names as well. So print, so you can just put name and then run it. You can see it. It prints the word Alice. So if I print the type of the name, it will print type string. So this is of type string. As I said, Python is a pure object-oriented language. Everything here is an object. So this belongs to class string. Basically, this is an object of class string. This name. Similar with the message as well. So we covered the first type of data, that is integer data type, in which we had numeric data, in which we had integer, we had floats, and we had complex numbers. Then in the textual thing, we had, so in the text type we have this string classes, and then comes the sequence types. Okay, the first thing is list. We'll delve deeper into those when we'll go to data structures. Here we are just seeing data types now, so we'll see how to use this list and stuff like that. A list is nothing but a collection of items. If you see it here, it's a collection of items. And here I have mentioned the word mutable. Mutable means you can change it. By change, I mean, for example, if you define a list is defined by these square braces. If I write, for example, a list of fruits, so you can see apple, banana, cherry, then you can replace this cherry, you can put some other things in there. So you can change these things. If something is changeable, we call it mutable. By mutability is that you can change it. You can reassign the values. For example, if you write a is equal 10, then you wrote a is equal 11. So this was mutable. Okay, some things are unmutable. So a list is just a collection of items which are mutable, if you see it. Then we have a tuple. A tuple can be represented like this. So there are differences between tuple and things, because tuple is immutable. You cannot change the elements. So for example, if we have the tuple of coordinates here, 3, 4, if you want to reassign something to coordinates, it won't happen. You cannot reassign the values. It will show it is immutable. Okay. Then we have a sequence type range. So range, for example, if you write range 1 to 10, so it will output a list of numbers from 1 to 10. If you see it. Basically 1 to 9, I guess it does not take last number into consideration. So we can see them. So just going to the coding environment, the first type of the sequence was list. I said list, here is a list of fruits. We'll just print this list of fruits, print, and we'll say fruits. So it should print the list of fruits that we defined, apple, banana and cherry. I said it is mutable. So here you can see it is mutable. I mentioned it here, it is mutable. So if I just change, for example, I'll say fruits, it is indexed from 0, 1 and 2. So if I have these coordinates now, so if I want to change coordinates, okay, because there are two coordinates, coordinates 1, I want to change it to, for example, let's say 6. Let's first print it without doing any change, without mutating it. So I'll just change it. You can see coordinates are 3, 4. But if I mutate it, if I try to change the coordinates, look what will happen. It'll give me an error. It's saying tuple object does not support item assignment. That means you cannot change it. Once assigned, you cannot change the tuple. That's what I mean. Tuple is unmutable. Elements cannot be changed. And it should have similar elements. For example, in the tuple, if I have 5 in here, so you can just uncomment, you can comment out this line and it prints 3, 4, 5. But if you put a string, for example, hello, and if you run it now, actually it does support in here. So there's different versions of Python are also there, so it depends on the version. I'm using Python 3.10. maybe they have modified the version. But the main thing that you have to take out of these, the main difference is that list, you can mutate the list, you cannot mutate the tuple. Then we have range, as I said. For example, if I want to, I'm using this range 1 to 10, it will print the numbers. You can see the range is gives a range of numbers from 1 to 10. Sometimes you use in the for loop the range of this. It basically gives a list of these things. So when you have the range of 1 to 10 means it will go from 1, 2, 3, 4 up till 9. So till last number. So this range is also a sequence of numbers. So basically it comes in sequence data type. If you see it here, I have mentioned it, sequence data types. So first thing was list, then we had tuple, then we had range as well. Then we have mapping data types, in which we have dictionary. So what do you mean by a dictionary in a normal sense? In dictionary, we had something for which we have a key and pair values. So if you look at the English dictionary, English to Urdu, so we have some, for example, words apple. So its meaning is written in front of it, save. Okay. So this is a key and this is a value. So we have key value pairs in a dictionary. So now we are discussing about the data types. Just telling you the whole picture. The first thing that we discussed, coming back, we discussed about numeric types. In that we had 3 types: integer, float and complex number. In text type we had just string. In sequence type we had list, tuple and range. And then now we are mapping data types. So there we have dictionary. So dictionary has 2 things. It has key and value. For example, if I have to mention a dictionary, I'll say person. If you see it here, I have mentioned a person here. Then first name, its name is Alice. Okay, age is 30. City, it lives in New York. So this basically is dictionary. So if I call name, it will give Alice, because this is its key and this is its key and this is value. So if you see, we have pairs of values. The dictionary is defined by these curly braces. So we just put commas in to separate out the elements. If you can see here, name, Alice, age, 30, city, New York. Okay, so you can see it in the code as well. If I just wanted to show you the code, so in here you have this dictionary. If I want to say person, for example, I'll put a name. I think it should run. It says with the name key, its name is Alice. If I want to put see age, it can give me age 30. It gives me the other element back. Okay. Then we have set types as well. So there are 2 types of sets. You also have read this in +1 or +2 sets. There is a chapter. So we have sets as well. So in sets we also have curly braces, but we don't have pairs of values. We have just one value. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, you can see it. So this is a set. It's a collection of unique items. It does not accept duplicates. So what I mean by indexable, if I create a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the computer's memory they are stored like this. So there are indices 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if it's named as ARR, so when you say ARR of 2, it will bring this element 3. Set is not indexable. That's why I was trying to mutate that one element. But then I suddenly, after reading the error, I came to know that this is not scriptable. Why? There is an obvious reason. Because it does not keep the memory like this. It does not have the values stored in this way. So it cannot be indexed. Okay, though you can mutate it. Then we have something called as frozen set. Frozen set means if you do not want to change anything. So this is frozen set actually. It is similar to a set, but it's immutable. Okay, if you see it here. Are you able to see it? So unique numbers, we have a set which is basically mutable. You can change the whole set, you can assign it some other set. But if you want this set to be immutable, you can just define it as a frozen set. Frozen set will give it the values, you cannot mutate. Okay, you came to know that. One more point is that set is also not indexable. You cannot index a set. You can index a list, you can index a tuple, but you cannot index it. So we have to learn all of these things in detail, but here we just wanted to get a bird's eye view what are the things that are present there.